Thus speaks the red judge. Why did this criminal murder? He wanted to rob. But I say unto you, his soul wanted blood, not robbery. He thirsted after the bliss of the knife. His poor reason, however, did not comprehend this madness, and persuaded him. What matters blood? It asked. Don't you want at least to commit a robbery with it? To take revenge? And he listened to his poor reason. Its speech lay upon him like lead. So he robbed when he murdered. He did not want to be ashamed of his madness. And now the lead of his guilt lies upon him. And again his poor reason is so stiff, so paralyzed, so heavy. If only he could shake his head, then his burden would roll off. But who could shake this head? This is Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche, Walter Kaufmann's translation. This is probably one of the most interesting parts of the book I've read, and it puzzled me for some time. But I actually think it's very instructive as to Nietzsche's psychological take on things. I want to explain it. I believe he is actually interpreting Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and the character Raskolnikov. I believe this is perhaps the character, because Nietzsche read Dostoevsky. I don't know which books. I believe he read The Possessed, or aka Demons, which I've read, really great. I read almost all of Crime and Punishment. And Nietzsche said Dostoevsky was the only psychologist he had something to learn from. And when he found Dostoevsky, he said it was like he was overjoyed to find such a writer. So Nietzsche here, I believe, to be interpreting Raskolnikov, and saying Raskolnikov, who is a character in Crime and Punishment, who commits a murder. He murders his landlady in order to take her money, because she's wealthy, and then to use that money so that her sister doesn't have to get married to this person she doesn't love, because that person has a lot of money who she'd be marrying, and the family's in a dire state. So he commits the murder under the thought there is no moral reason why anyone ought not to commit murder. There's nothing fixed in the universe that says murder is wrong. It's only out of moral cowardice that people don't commit murder. Thus, Raskolnikov eventually kills his landlady. Now, Nietzsche here seems to be suggesting, that the judge, right, these red judges think that, why did this criminal murder? Their reason is he wanted to rob. When you think about it, it doesn't quite make sense. If you want to rob somebody, you don't have to murder them. Unless they put up a fight, let's say, and they're fighting for their life. The point is, robbery isn't murder. It's robbery. He basically is saying that the murderer has this drive that doesn't fit into rationality, namely the bliss of the knife, or wanting blood. And he says that his reason cannot comprehend this madness. So basically says to him, why don't you want to rob too? Right? Maybe that's the reason why you're doing this, right? You just want to rob them. So he commits the robbery, essentially out of guilt, because the murderer cannot accept that he wanted to murder, that he wanted to control and exert his power on another person. pure and simply, without a reason other than that, without a reason other than blood. And because the murderer can't accept himself, his own madness, he then, out of his not accepting himself, commits a robbery in order to feel more justified in his action. In other words, commits a robbery to have a rationality back his madness, to have a rationale for his own actions. But Nietzsche is here saying that this isn't true. He didn't want to rob, he wanted to murder, and he robbed because he felt he could not accept his own madness, couldn't comprehend his own madness, and reason, being this part of himself, essentially says, don't you want to take revenge? Don't you want to choose somebody who's wealthy, right? So you can gain in some sense. So that you can have a rationality for your murderous desires, let's say. This here is really psychologically dense. So he's saying, he really touches on a whole lot, because he feels that reason, Nietzsche feels ultimately that reason is often a way the human being is a justification the human being seeks for their own irrational drives. So when you think about like the lead of guilt that hangs over the person's head, right? They're thinking, oh, why did I murder that person? I just wanted to rob, right? This is the reason they're experiencing guilt, Nietzsche is hinting at, is because they're trying to believe in a lie. They're trying to deceive themselves into believing that they didn't just madly want to murder, but that it was because they wanted to rob that they murdered. And because this doesn't make any sense, because you could rob someone without murdering them, the lead of guilt that hangs over their head is, I didn't have to murder. I could have just robbed them. Why did I do that, right? The reason was I wanted to rob. I didn't have to. In other words, because they can't accept themselves and the irrational, mad parts of themselves, they in turn are desperate in searching for a reason to justify themselves. And I find this is very key to understanding Nietzsche's psychology, his psychological take, because when you think about people being desperate to justify their irrational forces working within them, that these forces are trying to seek an outlet. They're trying to seek a justification to exist and to express themselves. And reason, for some reason, right, provides a sort of justification. It's like saying abracadabra. You say the magic words, I want to do this for this X reason, and then voila, the irrational drive gets unleashed and it gets to exert itself under the badge of reason, but in reality is not operating rationally. Its roots are embedded in what is not rational, but instead what is outside of rationality. Not necessarily the opposite of rationality, but merely something that cannot be articulated according to rationality. Rationality can't comprehend it. Can't comprehend this madness, right? It's just like, it's crazy. I don't know. There's no sort of rationality to it. There's no justification to it. And you can think about this in all sorts of ways, even in your day-to-day. I know in my day-to-day, I can experience people giving me certain reasons for being angry, and the reason they give won't add up. And I'll even, that you'll experience the hopelessness, let's say, of calling a person out and saying, well, your reason doesn't make sense for you to feel this way because of this reason. And you're dishing out reasons, when in reality, the basis is not reason, and that's why they keep reaching for different reasons. When you call out that reason as being insufficient to justify their feeling X, Y, and Z, is you're arguing in the reverse way you should, because in reality, the person in front of you who's having this emotional exertion is desperate to feel this madness and is searching desperately for any which reason that will help relieve itself of this pent-up energy that is whatever it is. It could be emotional, right? So this is very much my experience as well. I could have feelings of insecurity, for example, low feelings of self-worth, and because I'm carrying around this very heavy feeling, and let's say not accepting it right away, my eyes, right, what I'm conscious of will very much resonate often with this pent-up feeling I have inside of me. Like, my interpretation of certain actions will align with what I'm feeling deep down, because what I'm feeling deep down is trying to unleash itself into the present, and it's searching for anything that's going to make me accept who I am, essentially, which is a person who's, let's say, feeling insecure, feeling angry, feeling sad, right? Because I'm carrying this around and don't accept the matter parts of myself that do not yet have a justification according to reason, because I don't yet have the solace of reasonable justification, I do not allow these sort of emotional exertions to unleash. And as a result, my ear, right, my consciousness, my receptivity to the present very much becomes a desperate search to find the sort of golden key to however I'm feeling, and everything essentially that I will experience, almost everything, can potentially become, once I interpret it deep enough, that very same key. So, for example, I could be insecure, right, and not letting myself feel that because I don't yet feel like I have a good enough reason to, and then just one reason after another will keep piling up until eventually, it takes literally the straw that I find will break the camel's back, and I will say, oh, it's because of 10 years ago that I'm feeling this way, because 10 years ago it's undeniably was a bad time, or undeniably that event 10 years ago justified my feeling how I'm feeling now. But in reality, if you look at the psychology of the matter, you'll see that the person is desperately searching in the past now to justify a way that they're feeling now, because they're not letting themselves feel what they're feeling now, because they don't feel justified. So, in other words, people are scared to feel how they feel in real time, in the present, and the past is a safe place where it doesn't have to do with anyone in the now. And it, in other words, is easier for a person to accept feelings that they've had in the past rather than the present. So their unconscious is essentially saying, or whatever you want to call it, is essentially like, okay, you won't accept that you're really feeling insecure for this very small and embarrassing reason, then I'm going to find, some reason way deep down in your past that will justify that you will be forced to accept, so that you can finally feel the way that you're feeling right now. So that's pretty dense, and it also touches upon Nietzsche's take on why he's skeptical of morality, because he believes ultimately that people who propound their with moral fervency particular actions, he believes and is skeptical of them, because he thinks that ultimately what these people are doing is they're finding the most popular moral route so that they can justify the unleashing and exertion of their own power. And insofar as it's that, he's very skeptical of it. He's skeptical of their reasons as being pure moral reasons, and more to do with ways in which they want to justify a will to power, let's say. So I hope that helps you understand that. That was a pretty long video, but take care.